You've seen the movies, you've read the books. Fierce Vikings in horned helmets. A clueless queen telling starving peasants to eat cake. A handful of warriors holding off a 1,000,000-man army. These are the stories that make history feel epic. But it turns out a lot of them are just that. Stories. History isn't just written by the victors. It's rewritten by artists, filmmakers, and centuries of playing a game of telephone. Today we're cutting through the noise to expose the truth behind some of history's most famous myths. Prepare to have what you think you know about the past turned completely upside down. Let's start with an image so famous it's basically a logo. The Viking. Close your eyes and picture one. I bet you're seeing a burly, bearded warrior with a huge axe and of course a helmet with 2 giant horns sticking out of it. It's on football helmets, in cartoons, and all over Hollywood. But here's the reality. There is zero proof that Vikings ever wore horned helmets in a fight. Just think about it for a second. A helmet is supposed to make you safer by deflecting sword blows. Sticking 2 giant handles on top would be a fighter's nightmare. An enemy's blade could easily catch on a horn, snap your neck, or worse, guide the sword right into your skull. Real Viking helmets were much smarter. They were simple, bowl-shaped caps, maybe with a guard for your nose or eyes. They were functional, not fantasy. So where did this horned helmet idea even come from? For that, you can thank the 19th century. Artists started painting these super dramatic, romanticized versions of Viking history, but the image was truly locked into place by, of all things, an opera. When Richard Wagner staged his epic Der Ring der Nibelungen in the 1870s, the costume designer put the singers in horned helmets to look more intimidating on stage. The look was so powerful it stuck. And now a piece of stagecraft has completely overshadowed the truth about these skilled but sensibly dressed seafarers. Next up is a quote that has become the tagline for wealthy people being totally out of touch. The scene: revolutionary France. The people are starving, there's no bread. When Queen Marie Antoinette hears about it, she supposedly scoffs and says, "Let them eat cake." It's the perfect example of a royal who is completely disconnected from reality. The only problem, she never said it. Not once. There's no evidence at all that links Marie Antoinette to that phrase. In fact, versions of that line had been floating around for decades before she was even queen. The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau used it in his book Confessions, written around 1766. He said, "A great princess uttered the words," but at that time, Marie Antoinette was a 10-year-old kid in Austria who had never even been to France. The original French phrase, "qu'ils mangent de la brioche," refers to a rich, buttery bread. So still out of touch, but not exactly the frosted dessert we picture. The quote was basically political propaganda. A pre-packaged story about arrogant royals that was easy to pin on the unpopular foreign-born queen to stir up anger. In reality, biographers say Marie Antoinette was actually known for being charitable. But a juicy story, especially one that fuels a revolution, is hard to let go of. And so the queen is forever stuck with a heartless quote she never said. It's one of the greatest last stands in history, the subject of comics and massive blockbuster movies. In 480 BC, 300 elite Spartan warriors led by King Leonidas defend the narrow pass of Thermopylae against 1,000,000 Persians. Their sacrifice inspires Greece to unite and win the war. is the ultimate story of heroism against impossible odds. But the story of only 300 Spartans isn't the whole story. While those 300 were absolutely at the center of the fight, they were far from alone. Historians believe the total Greek force was actually closer to 7,000 soldiers. That army included men from all over Greece, Thespians, Thebans, and others, all there to fight the Persian invaders. Now, this doesn't make the Spartans any less brave, and the Persian army, while probably not 1 million strong like ancient writers claimed, was still gigantic, estimated at somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000. The odds were still insane. The legend of the 300 really took hold on the final day of the battle. After a traitor showed the Persians a secret path to surround them, Leonidas knew it was over. He sent most of the Greek army away to save them to fight another day, but he stayed behind with his 300 Spartans plus about 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans to form a rear guard and fight to the death. They were wiped out, but they bought precious time for everyone else to escape. So while the 300 are the most famous, their heroic last stand was only possible because of the thousands of other Greeks who stood with them. The Dark Ages. The name alone makes you think of ignorance, superstition, and a world where everyone thought the earth was flat. The common story is that people were terrified sailors would just fall off the edge, until the brilliant Christopher Columbus came along and proved the world was round. Yeah, that whole story is a myth. Educated people in the Middle Ages knew the world was a sphere. This wasn't some secret knowledge. The ancient Greeks had figured it out around the 5th century BC and even calculated its size with shocking accuracy. That knowledge was never lost. Scholars and church officials throughout the medieval period all accepted that the earth was round. So why did people argue with Columbus? It had nothing to do with the earth being flat. His critics weren't worried he'd sail off an edge. They were worried he'd starve to death. The debate was about how big the earth was. Columbus thought the planet was much smaller than it really is. His opponents argued correctly that the ocean was way too big to cross with the ships they had back then. Columbus just got incredibly lucky that an entire continent nobody in Europe knew about was blocking his path. The myth of the medieval flat earthers was mostly cooked up in the 19th century to make the past seem unenlightened, and to frame Columbus as a lone genius of science. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Her name brings up images of the Nile pyramids and the ultimate Egyptian queen who charmed two of Rome's most powerful men. But her actual background tells a very different story. Cleopatra wasn't ethnically Egyptian at all, she was Greek. Her family, the Ptolemaic dynasty, was started by one of Alexander the Great's generals who took over Egypt after Alexander died. For 300 years this Greek dynasty ruled Egypt, and they mostly kept to themselves, often marrying brother to sister to keep the power in the family. While she ruled from the Egyptian city of Alexandria, her first language was Greek. But to her credit, Cleopatra was the only ruler in her entire family line to actually learn the Egyptian language. It was a smart move that made her popular with her subjects and showed a respect for their culture that her ancestors never bothered with. But her family tree, according to all the evidence we have, traces back to Macedonia, not Egypt. The last pharaoh of Egypt was by blood European. Poor George Washington, a brilliant general, a founding father, the first president, and the guy with wooden teeth. It's one of those fun facts we all learn as kids. That image of the nation's leader with a clunky wooden smile is burned into American folklore. But it's totally false. Washington did have awful dental problems. He lost his first tooth at 22, and by the time he became president, he only had one of his own teeth left. He went through several sets of dentures, but not a single one was made of wood. They were actually made from a pretty gruesome mix of materials: hippopotamus, ivory, gold, lead, and even human and animal teeth. Records show he even bought teeth from his own enslaved workers at Mount Vernon. So why the wooden myth? The most likely culprit is staining. The ivory he used would have soaked up stains from food and wine, eventually cracking and turning a grainy brownish color that probably just looked like wood. Washington's constant dental pain was a source of misery for him, even changing the shape of his face and making it hard for him to speak. The truth is way more tragic and frankly more horrifying than the simple myth of wooden teeth. We've busted some huge myths today, but history is full of them. What's a historical fact you've always been suspicious of? Let us know down in the comments, and maybe we'll cover it in a future video. And if you like having your brain wrinkled, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. So Vikings didn't wear horned helmets, Marie Antoinette never offered cake, and the 300 Spartans had plenty of backup. It really goes to show you that history is almost never as simple as the stories we tell. The real past is messier, more complicated, and honestly way more interesting than the myths. The stories we choose to believe about history often say more about us than they do about the people who actually lived it. Thanks for watching.